A mechanic with over 30 years in the shop told me a phrase I never forgot: "There's nothing more expensive than a cheap car." And he was right. Because even though at the dealership they paint it as a bargain, there are cars that don't even reach 60,000 miles without starting to give you headaches. Engines that blow up, transmissions that go to hell, and parts that seem made of recycled plastic. Today I'm going to tell you about the 20 cars you should never buy if you don't want to end up cursing the moment you took out your checkbook. And I assure you something, number 1 on this list is so disastrous that even mechanics themselves call it tin can with wheels. Number 20. Peugeot 307. When it came out, many thought it was a step forward in design and comfort compared to its predecessor, the 306. The problem is it came with an Achilles heel that frustrated thousands of owners: the electronics. Dashboards that suddenly went dark, engine sensors that sent false signals, and an endless list of electrical failures made it one of the least reliable compacts of its era. Added to this were problems with the rear suspension and power steering that in many cases stopped working without warning. It's true that not all came out bad, but the 307 ended up accumulating so much bad reputation in shops that many mechanics recommend avoiding it used. Number 19. Renault Laguna. The Laguna was presented as Renault's serious bet to enter strongly in the mid-size sedan segment, a car with elegant design and technological equipment that at the time seemed ahead of its era. And yes, it was comfortable, spacious, and attractive for executives and families looking to move up in category without paying the price of a German car. The problem was that all that technology became its worst enemy. The second generation, especially, accumulated a disastrous reputation in shops. The key card ignition instead of keys was a novelty, but they constantly failed, leaving more than one driver stranded, unable to start the car. The electronic systems were so plagued with errors that many mechanics joked, saying the Laguna didn't need a battery, but an exorcist. Warning lights that came on for no reason, capricious ABS sensors, electric power steering failures, and recurring problems with comfort modules, from window regulators to air conditioning. Added to all this were serious mechanical failures in the DCI diesel engines, especially in turbos and injectors, which became a sure expense after passing 60,000 miles. The Laguna promised sophistication, but became a feared car in the used market. Today it's still common to see units for sale at ridiculously low prices, and it's no coincidence. Buyers know that taking a Laguna means accepting a marriage with the shop. And although there are those who defend it, arguing that, if it comes out good, it comes out very good, the reality is that this model's breakdown lottery has been enough to stain the car's name forever. If you're looking for a sedan that lasts and won't eat your salary in repairs, the Laguna is exactly what you should avoid. Number 18. Ford EcoSport. This model was launched as an accessible solution for those who wanted to have a compact SUV with the confidence of a brand like Ford. With attractive design, competitive price, and promise of practicality, it quickly became a success in emerging markets and also in Europe. But behind those first impressions, the EcoSport accumulated complaints so big that even today it continues being criticized in forums and owner reviews. The first big problem was its build quality. Many owners noticed from the first months that interior plastics were fragile, adjustments poor, and noises appeared everywhere. A car with less than 20,000 miles already seemed to have 10 years on it, with dashboard crickets and vibrations on every trip. Ergonomics didn't help either. The side-opening tailgate was uncomfortable, impractical, and even dangerous in tight parking spaces. Mechanically, small engines turned out to be unreliable in certain markets, especially the famous 1-liter EcoBoost engine, which suffered serious problems related to overheating, coolant leaks, and even documented cases of complete engine seizure. Power shift automatic transmissions also gave headaches, with premature failures in clutches and mechatronics. Repairing them wasn't cheap, and in many cases owners had to face bills that made the supposed initial savings disappear. Most ironic is that Ford tried to sell the EcoSport as a global solution for those who couldn't access a larger SUV, but ended up being a stain on the brand's reputation in several markets. Today, finding a used unit that's well cared for is complicated, and even if it seems in good condition, the risks of inheriting its defects are so high that most experts recommend avoiding it. Number 17. Opel Meriva. This compact MPV seemed practical for small families, but turned out to be a maintenance headache. The Easytronic gearboxes, a kind of robotized manual, were so unreliable that many mechanics directly recommend avoiding any unit that has it. Additionally, small gasoline engines suffered from excessive oil consumption and front suspension parts wore prematurely. Worst of all is that Opel sold it as a car designed to last, when in reality after 60,000 miles many owners found themselves with bills that made the supposed initial savings disappear. Number 16. Seat Cordoba. For a time it was very popular in markets where affordable cars with Volkswagen Group confidence were sought. However, in practice, the Cordoba didn't meet expectations. Low displacement engines were sluggish and tended to suffer coil and mass airflow sensor failures, leaving many stranded without warning. Additionally, interior quality left much to be desired, with hard plastics that deteriorated quickly and quite poor ride comfort. Worst is that in trying to position itself as an economical option, they cut so much on components that it ended up being a car that aged badly, and today many with less than 60,000 miles seem to have double the life on them. Number 15. Hyundai Matrix. This car, designed in collaboration with Pininfarina, seemed to offer practicality and space in a compact format. But unattractive aesthetics wasn't its only problem. Mechanical reliability didn't accompany it either. Manual transmissions suffered premature wear, gasoline engines had coil and sensor failures, and electronics behaved erratically over time. Additionally, rust in critical areas was a common problem in many markets. Over the years, the Matrix remained as an example of a car that promised practicality, but failed to age well or resist the passage of time without giving headaches. Number 14. Citroën C4 Picasso. This family MPV was a sales success, but also a headache for those who had it beyond 60,000 miles. The rear pneumatic suspension was one of its great virtues, until it started failing. And when it did, repair cost more than many were willing to pay. HD diesel engines also gave problems with injectors and EGR valves, generating costly repairs. And electronically, the C4 Picasso accumulated fame for having countless delicate sensors that turned on the malfunction light for no apparent reason. It was comfortable, it was spacious, but maintaining it over the years could leave your bank account trembling. Number 13. Chevrolet Cruze. It was presented as a global sedan capable of competing with the big Japanese and European compacts, but reality was different. The automatic transmission in many markets failed frequently, gasoline engines suffered with oil consumption, and interiors, although of correct appearance, deteriorated too quickly. Additionally, suspension didn't resist bad roads well, causing constant noises and loose parts before 60,000 miles. Many considered it a car that aged too quickly, and today, it's one of those models that's hard to sell used because buyers already know its bad reputation. Number 12. Daewoo Lanos. Although it may sound distant today, this car was mass sold in many countries during the late 90s and early 2000s, and there are still quite a few rolling around. It was cheap, yes, but also very unreliable. Engines were simple but suffered recurring failures in gaskets and oil leaks. Transmissions couldn't handle intensive use, and the body was so prone to rust that some looked like 30-year-old cars just 5 years after leaving the dealership. Buying one today is practically signing a sentence of constant shop visits, and although its low price may tempt, it's one of those cars that turn out expensive in the long run. Number 11. Lancia Libra. This Italian sedan tried to compete with prestigious brands offering design and comfort, but ended up being a failure in reliability terms. Gasoline engines were acceptable, but diesels accumulated problems with injectors, turbos, and EGR. Additionally, electronics were a real headache, with failures in instrument clusters, air conditioning, and control units. Worst was that finding specific parts wasn't always easy or cheap, making any repair even more expensive. Many describe it as a car with Italian soul, elegant and different, but that aged with the same defects that condemned the brand in many markets. Number 10. Fiat Punto. When it came out, everyone saw it as a youthful, cheap car, practical for the city. But what they didn't tell you was that it was built with parts so fragile it seemed like a toy puzzle. The Punto has a reputation for breaking suspensions just by going over a pothole, and believe me, if you live in Latin America or Spain, dodging potholes is as difficult as dodging mosquitoes in summer. The clutch wears faster than normal, manual transmissions start sounding like old blenders, and interior finishes, well, that's another story. Plastics that fade in the sun, buttons that stop working, and air conditioning that cools less than a Chinese fan from the 80s. A customer at the shop where my uncle worked complained that his Punto seemed chronically ill. They'd fix one thing and a week later another would come up. If you pampered it, you could stretch it a bit, but most got fed up before reaching 60,000 miles. That's why, if you ever see a cheap one in the used market, think twice. That attractive price is a trap. Cheap comes out expensive, and with this car even more so. Number 9. Chevrolet Aveo. This car sold like hotcakes, especially because General Motors offered it with payment facilities and cheap parts. The problem is that cheap and good rarely go hand in hand. The Aveo is one of those cars that at first glance seem compliant, but as soon as you start adding miles you realize the party ends very soon. The engine suffers oil leaks almost from new. The automatic transmission has a reputation for failing before 60,000 miles, and worst is that repairing it costs almost the same as the entire car in the used market. And don't even mention safety. If you have an Aveo and hit it hard, you're basically driving a tin can with wheels. An old friend bought it because he wanted an economical car to go to work. At 45,000 miles, he was already spending on repairs the same as on gasoline. Blown water pumps, cracked radiators, and the famous ignition coils that die faster than a wet firecracker. In summary, a headache. The Aveo is a deceptive car. At first it complies, but when problems start, you realize you bought a direct ticket to the shop. Number 8. Chrysler Sebring. If the Aveo is a tin can with wheels, the Sebring is a theater of false promises. It was sold as an elegant, American, robust sedan. But anyone who's had one knows it's a car with more failures than virtues. The automatic transmission is famous for failing without warning. One day you drive normally and the next you're stranded without reverse or forward. The interiors, which in photos seemed luxurious, in real life were cheap plastics that cracked in the sun. And the electrical systems? Dear God. Windows that get stuck, dashboards that turn off by themselves, sensors that trigger warning lights even though nothing's wrong. In the shop we saw Sebrings come in with less than 55,000 miles, and it seemed they'd been through a war. The curious thing is that Chrysler always promoted it as a reliable car. But mechanics know, that car is the equivalent of marrying someone problematic. Lots of appearance, but within months you're crying with divorce papers in hand. The Sebring is one of those cars that age badly, that as soon as the warranty ends show you their true face. And believe me, it's not pretty. These are just the first 3 on the list, and you're probably already realizing what I mean. There are cars that seem like bargains, but don't last at all. Get ready because we're going to enter thornier territory, with cars that sold like hotcakes, but today are remembered as true mechanical nightmares. Number 7. Ford Ka. The Ford Ka was for years the urban car par excellence. Compact, cheap and with a design that tried to be nice, as if saying, look at me, I'm little but compliant. The problem is that charm lasted the same as ice cream in the sun. Small engines seemed resistant, but actually were made to last little. Coolant leaks, rust on chassis undersides, steering that creaked like old knees. All that before 60,000 miles. A veteran mechanic I knew always said the Ka was like those summer romances. Starts fun, but sooner or later leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And he was right. The clutch didn't hold up at all, suspensions gave way easily, and assembly quality was embarrassing. I've seen Ford Kas with barely 45,000 miles that looked like cars with triple the age. And worst is many bought it for children who just got their license, believing it was a reliable car. Error. It ends up being a ruin, a small money-eating monster disguised as an economical compact. Number 6. Jeep Compass, first generation. Here we enter SUV territory, and it must be said clearly, few SUVs have as bad a reputation as the first-generation Jeep Compass. Jeep was always synonymous with robustness, with off-road vehicles that could handle hell. But when they brought out the Compass, it seemed they'd forgotten everything they knew. The design was weird, neither square nor rounded, a strange hybrid that didn't convince even the most fanatic. But the worst was under the hood. That model's CVT transmission was a nightmare. It lasted less than hot coffee. Desperate customers arrived at the shop with less than 60,000 miles and the transmission was already dead, with no possibility of cheap repair. Replacing it cost a fortune. Additionally, interior plastics deteriorated at minimum contact with sun, and finishes seemed taken from a cheap car, not an SUV that at the time was sold as premium. The Compass is living proof that not everything bearing the Jeep logo guarantees quality. Saddest is that many people bought it thinking they'd have an SUV for life. Well, no. For life, of the shop, yes. Because those mechanics got rich with Compass repairs. Number 5. Nissan Frontier, certain generations. And now let's go with a pickup, because of course, Many people believe a truck is synonymous with durability. And yes, many are. But the Nissan Frontier from some generations came out with a defect that marked it forever. Defective transmissions that blew before 60,000 miles. A pickup that can't handle heavy work is like a hammer that breaks when you nail the first nail. Useless. And that's what happened with the Frontier. The automatic transmission from certain years had a design problem. The transmission fluid mixed with the radiator fluid. Result, the transmission got contaminated, damaged, and you were stranded on the highway with a repair costing thousands of dollars. I remember a customer who used his Frontier to work in construction. He took care of it like gold, did all maintenance, but at 50,000 miles the transmission died. He spent almost half of what the vehicle was worth on repairs and swore never to buy a Nissan again. And he's not the only one. The Frontier's reputation plummeted because pickups don't forgive. If they don't hold up, the public remembers forever. Yes, it's true that other Frontier generations have been good, even very reliable. But the bad ones already left the stain in history. And for someone who wants a car that lasts decades, messing with a pickup that has a reputation for breaking transmissions is playing with fire. Number 4. Hyundai Elantra, certain series. This case is curious because Hyundai, in general, has made reliable cars. But the Elantra, especially in some series, was a monumental stumble. Engines that consumed oil as if they were thirsty camels, electrical systems that failed for no apparent reason, and suspensions that aged quickly. A mechanic friend always said the Elantra was the shop chameleon. It came in for anything. Sometimes it was the transmission, other times the air conditioning, other times simply dashboard lights lit up like a Christmas tree. And the owner never understood what was happening, because the car seemed relatively new. The most serious problem was oil consumption. Some engines had a factory defect that made them waste oil exaggeratedly. If the driver wasn't careful, he could run out of lubrication and ruin the entire engine in minutes. Imagine buying a new car and having to carry oil as if it were gasoline. A real disaster. Additionally, interiors didn't resist the passage of years well. Buttons that faded, loose upholstery, and finishes that seemed from a much cheaper car. And although Hyundai tried to fix those problems in later versions, the Elantra's bad reputation was marked. We've reached number 4, and if you already recognized some of these cars, watch out, because the worst is still to come. And before continuing, let me tell you something. If this content is opening your eyes and preventing you from throwing your money at a tin can with wheels, subscribe right now and give it a like, because what's left in the top can surprise you more than you imagine. Now we're going to enter truly swampy territory. The 3 cars that have given the most headaches in recent years, plus one that takes the crown as the worst of all. That car that, if you buy it, you'll most likely end up regretting for life. Number 3. Chevrolet Captiva. Few SUVs have as bad a reputation as the Captiva. It was sold as the ideal family SUV, spacious, modern, and with robust appearance. But beneath that facade hid a mechanical nightmare. Diesel engines overheated easily, automatic transmissions wore out prematurely, and electronic systems seemed designed to fail right after warranty ended. A customer who came to the shop with a Captiva swore he'd cared for it like a baby, and even so, at 55,000 miles he was already repairing the transmission. Power steering failed out of nowhere, dashboard lights came on like a fair show, and replacement parts weren't exactly cheap. The Captiva aged worse than most, interiors that peeled, strange noises at every turn, and fuel consumption that made wallets cry. Many mechanics agree it's one of the worst SUVs that's passed through their hands. Curious thing is it sold very well at first, because advertising painted it as a reliable tank. But in practice, owners remember it as a bottomless pit of expenses. Number 2. Chrysler PT Cruiser. Here we enter controversial territory. The PT Cruiser was a car that divided opinions from the beginning. You either loved it or hated it. Its retro design caught attention, and many thought they were buying a car with style and personality. But what they didn't know is that under that peculiar body hid one of the most problematic cars of its era. Engines had constant overheating failures, electrical systems were a disaster, and transmissions were damaged just by looking at them wrong. Changing a water pump in the PT Cruiser was an almost surgical task, expensive and desperate. Additionally, suspension was so weak that just a few potholes were enough for it to start sounding like you were carrying an old bed in the trunk. I remember a mechanic once told me, "The PT Cruiser is like a toxic marriage. At the beginning it seems special, but then it ruins your life." And he wasn't exaggerating. Owners usually arrived at the shop resigned, knowing another fat bill was on the way. Ironic thing is that Chrysler promoted it as an iconic car when it actually became a joke among specialists. Number 1. Dodge Neon. And we reach the worst of all, the car no mechanic recommends, the one that earned the reputation of being an authentic nightmare on wheels. The Dodge Neon was sold as a youthful, cheap, and modern sedan. But the truth is it was a complete failure. Engines were fragile, head gaskets failed chronically, and transmissions had the useful life of a cheap light bulb. The interior seemed taken from a toy car: hard plastics, pieces that broke just by touching them, and finishes that came off with heat. The electrical system wasn't left behind, with problems in lights, sensors that stopped working, and computers that failed without explanation. A mechanic with over 20 years of experience told me he stopped accepting Neons in his shop because every repair was a headache and customers always ended up spending more than the car was worth. He literally said, "That car is crap, I don't even want it parked outside my shop." Harsh words, but totally true. The Neon represented everything you don't want in a car: fragile, unreliable, uncomfortable, and with zero resale value. Buying one was like signing a marriage contract with disaster. And although it sold a lot at the time, today there's no mechanic who defends it. These 10 cars are proof that not everything that glitters is gold. Many seemed like a good idea at the time, but ended up being a ruin for their owners. If your father or grandfather had a car that lasted 20 years without problems, it's normal that today you're disappointed with models like these. The industry changed, and in many cases, for the worse. Now I want to know your experience. What car did you have that came out so bad you swore never to buy that brand again? Leave it in the comments, because surely there are more stories worth hearing. And if this video helped open your eyes about what cars to avoid, give it a like and subscribe, because here we'll always tell you the truth, even if it hurts.